Thanks very much, everybody, for coming along today. I want to tell you a couple of stories about this week, and then that'll kind of lay the land. So this week, some interesting events. Obviously, Belfast Tech Week. One of the things that I was involved in was being part of an event earlier with Queen's on Tuesday, and Joe Kennedy III came along, and he was talking about the innovation that's here in Northern Ireland and how it's growing and scaling, and it's really exciting. He is promoting the NI PR machine, right? Fantastic. What did he say though? We're not talking about it enough. We're not telling our stories. That's why I wanted to come along today. We need to tell them locally. We need to tell them worldwide. So that was a really inspiring story. Layered on top of that, unfortunately, one of our close relatives passed away, but that was an elderly lady who inspired me to do some of the adventurous things that I've done. And one of the key things he said about her was she was curious and adventurous. So back to the story you were talking about on the stage earlier, you need people who bang your drum and support you. And that was one of the relatives that would have supported me on my journey to bring where we are today. So I wanted to bring those to the table. So we need to tell our stories and we need to have supportive people behind us. And I was fortunate enough to be thinking about ways to invest money. And there's loads of different ways, like ISAs and stocks and shares and lots of boring things. And came across the likes of Belfast Telegraph and Halo from the Science Park were promoting angel investing. I was like, oh, that's interesting. And just told Nico I'd been working in a startup, actually building technology little to ourselves. We didn't know what was going on, connectivity breaks. And I was like, that'd be cool if we could help support more startups and on their journey and investing, particularly locally. I went along and I found the page and there was 7 companies. We went into a room, tables, had your dinner, 7 companies pitched, and the company that had the most interest, everybody flocked to. Right, oh, let's go. It's a company called Red Raven. And they had supposedly invented a helmet that had wipers. So when you went on a motorbike or on a bike, I can't remember. I think it was a
useful here.
it had wipers and everybody was flocking to it. I thought this was class. And in the background, you kind of kept in touch to see where it went. But it suddenly turned out somebody somewhere else had invented these things and there was copyright and that didn't move forward. This is the life of startups. So that's how I got started. And yeah, I think from a startup perspective, from an investor perspective, people buy things that they're interested in, that they understand. And I personally look for things that I get and I would buy myself. So one of the first investments was actually Snuggle down at Nards, baby products. I'd had a young family and I thought, hey, that's cool. Let's go for that. And they are now...
Can I interject a little?
The journey?
I was on a Propel program with Adam, the founder of Snuggle at the time, and he was having a desperate time raising investment, and people just didn't get it. So thank God you did, because it was probably the tipping point. And there's always that tipping point where someone goes, "Fuck it, I'm going," and then everybody else that's been sitting on their hands a wee bit goes, "Oh, she's going to go, I might go," And I think that was what happened with Snuggle.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Like the programs that have been there since 2010. Do the work, do the peer-to-peer learning, do the education for a piece. I
get to be devil's avocado then. Well, a few of them have collapsed. Which is unique. So I doubt you can find anywhere else in the globe. I've looked where you would find actual, if you call them venture capital funds, I don't think they are, but they have actually collapsed. And that's a pretty unique environment, And the amazing thing is that quite a few of the companies, even though the funds have collapsed, quite a few of the companies have managed to survive, which is probably unique as well. So there is a kind of schism there, for sure.
The resilience there, I've been able to continue despite the government funding collapse. It's amazing despite the programs collapse. And so then fast forward a couple of years, bumped into AirPods actually, and I have the 2010 pitch, and I remember seeing AirPods and I was like, well, this is interesting, this is technology, this is new. Even working in a technology company, I'd invested in physical product before, what's this? And eSynergy was pushing companies out and trying to get investors, and that was really fascinating. And I was like, okay, let's watch this and see how it goes. And then, a couple of years later, I got busy. And we're like, okay, I don't want to do this hands-on stuff anymore. Let's look at funds. Let's look at other ways of investing. I think there's a thing called EIS funds, and they have their place. So far, they haven't done very successfully, the ones that I was involved in. So I thought, let's come back and be hands-on. I think that's the angel investment. It's being hands-on and being close there's a place for lots of different types of investments: low risk, medium risk, high risk, short term, medium term, and long term. Angel investing sits at long term, high risk, no doubt about it. So from the startup perspective,
What high reward if it works?
what have you seen from those days?
Well, if we go back to Halo, so I pitched at the 5th Halo, I think, or somewhere around there, and I pitched after they were called Greener Graves at the time. It's like, oh, don't go after the funeral, guys. Come on. You know, it's like, oh, for goodness sake. And you know what? It's happened loads of times. I did one pitch at Stanford, and it was after the guys who were going to solve heart attacks. And I'm like, come on. This is unreasonable. Funerals and heart attacks. You know, so I always got interest. I'll tell you a wee secret. I never used their deck in any of the Halos. No matter how many times Alan Watts told me I had to use their slide deck, I just did my own thing. So yeah, I think that the last Halo, which I was very resistant to go to, and Michael McDowell talked me into going to it. I wasn't going to go at all. I just went, you know what, same faces, same room. I don't think there's any point. And he went, look, just go along. It's the last one. You may as well wreck the place. And I was like, right, okay. So I went along, didn't use their deck, did my own thing, met Jennie, and kind of went, Jesus, I see somebody interested. I almost didn't know what to do. I'm like, interested in my business. I just kind of didn't expect this at all. But transformative for us. You know, because I'll tell you, Jennie's the bravest angel investor I've ever met. Just bravery. I don't know if I'd have that bravery, you know. But transformative for us.
But I think it's because I'd seen it before. So, you know, that story of actually the company still around, not knowing an awful lot about it. I'm like, oh, okay, still here. Mustn't be too bad.
We had survived the collapse of the venture capital fund at that point, which it took 6 years to unravel in terms of the investment agreement, because we had a bunch of angel investors and a bunch of US investors. So in the US, you have to be what's called a sophisticated investor, and you have to be registered. You don't have to do that in the UK or Europe at this point. They had never seen a fund collapse, obviously, and they were like, well, we're just going to sue everybody. And it's like, well, there's nobody to sue, right? And they're like, how can that be? And it's like, because it wasn't a real fund, it was a government fund, right? Well, we'll just sue Invest NI. Well, that's probably the only people you could sue, you know, but they're a government department, so you'd have to sue the department. And it just went down the chain, and they're going, are you telling us this can just collapse and we have no recourse? Yeah, I'm telling you, this has collapsed and you have no recourse. So that was a big problem for me in terms of investment, in terms of the operations of the business, in terms of all sorts of things. Our story was carrying a heavy burden at that point. Thankfully, you had seen it all before with Synergy, which is good, you know.
Well, at one other company, I've been through the similar process, and we've worked with both companies to try and separate that government voice. I mean, they're still a shareholder, but it's the voice and the power away from the commercial side of the business. You know, happy enough for them to follow, but I think they shouldn't really be leading, and I think that tends to happen because it's some of the biggest money here in Northern Ireland. Because it's the biggest money, they have the power and they have the voice.
It's also less risk.
It's
They're not taking real risk. It's not their money. So it's easy to lead when you're leading with somebody else's money. I lead any investment round you want with somebody else's money. Would I do it with my own? Maybe not. You know, that's the thing. So yeah, I think it's easy for them to come in. Their losses aren't counted, and we've seen, you know, the returns. If they are venture capital funds, I personally don't think they are. I think they're really grant funds under a venture capital banner. They are the worst returning funds on the planet if they want to call themselves venture capital funds. So therefore you shouldn't. I think it's unfair to call them venture capital funds. I don't think they were structured like venture capital funds. They were trying not to compete in the market with venture capital funds, and therefore had to have a venture capital fund structure. But they absolutely did not focus on the return on investment the way a VC fund would. There's just no way. So it's kind of unfair on them. And, you know, I've given a really hard time over the years, but I think they were kind of scuppered at the start by being called venture capital funds and being compared to commercial funds. Commercial funds couldn't behave like that at all.
And from the startup perspective, you're put on a path. Go here, go here, go here, go here. We can all name them, and that's great. But I think there's more outside of that bubble. And they, again, as I said earlier, shouldn't maybe lead. They should follow and support. So go outside the bubble, look for the support that's in your industry, look for the support that people get what you're doing. And we're now seeing more clusters in all different sectors, not just the cyber and life sciences, but we're seeing music clusters, we're seeing Climate
AI.
AI clusters. So go to your cluster, the people that get what you're doing have experienced that problem, and they'll be potentially your investors. Even your customers can be potentially investors. I keep talking, and I don't know if it's happened yet, but the person who's in a senior role who's experienced your problems probably making a fair bit of money. So if you go to them and say, here, could you be my customer? But actually on the sidelines, your company's the customer, but on the sidelines, you've experienced this problem. Would be interested in investing? That I want to find one of those. Like, I don't know if it's a PwC or a EY, I don't know who that person is, but that person in that company is experiencing that problem, but they've got a high wage and they've got a bit of disposable income. They could invest. And I want to see that.
Yeah, I'd love to see exit entrepreneurs really, kind of take over, frankly. I have seen the competition between the government funds and exit entrepreneurs. We had Stevie Morrow on the stage earlier, for example. Him and Danny Moore had Lockshore Investments, still do have Lockshore Investments, which was a very significant fund investing in the startups. And, it's documented Danny found it tough because he knew that something like a Crescent Capital could invest at the same level. The terms wouldn't be anywhere near as good, but it didn't matter because Crescent didn't need to return its money. So it's like you say, that there's been this oppositional relationship where it could have been that the private led, the public follows. And actually, I think Enterprise Ireland is the model because they don't lead necessarily. They used to. They realised, we're not good at this. And they look for the private lead and they come in behind. And for me, that's a better model, for sure.
Halo's going through a couple of iterations. It still exists. It's called HBAM. It is, and really, it's one network of many that you can go and learn. You can learn online, you can learn in person about what angel investing is, what the risks are, what the rewards are, what the process is. But like any program, I guess there has to be real life experiences as well. So go and talk to people who've been there and done it. That's what I did. I kind of listened and looked at people who are a couple of steps ahead. Didn't mean that they'd had a return. They were just a couple of steps ahead and done it the same as me. So that would be my advice. So fast forward from Halo Fishing, that was one of Catalyst's last hurrahs, and it moved.
Mine was the last Halo. Yeah, the one that we met at was the last Halo. Yeah.
It was a tendered program, and it disappeared for 2 years. And we're like, well, how are startups going to find investors, and how are investors going to find startups? So we started running some crazy events.
Yeah, raise.
Like this.
Yeah. So the first raise event was done in the Ulster Bank Accelerator space, where it was in Lombard Street, which was fantastic. And it cost 176 quid. Nobody believes it. So we didn't have the room, we didn't do anything. And actually the 176 quid was the booze that we bought. So and we had funds flying in from England. We had, funds coming up from the south. We had angel investors. We didn't have anybody from the public sector because of me, because I gave them too much grief, which was great because it meant they weren't taking up the seats. The place was rammed full of people that were interested in investing, and lots and lots of things were done on that day. First ever pitch by Cloudsmith, which went on to close one of the largest seed rounds ever seen in Northern Ireland. Not taking credit for that. That's credit to them, and certainly credit to the guys they work with that treated it like a military operation to do it. But it gave them a little bit of exposure to put them out there into the world. So yeah, we kind of went, we're going to float our own boat for a while. We're just going to do the thing that is required, which is the interface between entrepreneurs and investors.
And it's a learning space as well. It could be potential investors walking in and going, this is an interesting pitch. It could be people thinking about investing coming in and going, what is this all about? It could be startups coming in and going, what does a pitch look like? So becoming a bit more informal, a bit more relaxed, opens opportunity for conversation. And it's, dare I say, the pitch decks entertainment.
Yeah, I've done 10 pitches in 14 years. Because someone told me, you only pitch when you want the meeting. Don't pitch for the sake of it. You've only got so many in you, Don't tell your competitors what you're doing unless you have to. All that sort of stuff. So I have genuinely stuck that and went, if there's nobody here I don't want to, and you'll remember, the diamond raise, where the only guy I wanted to talk to I was talking to already, so I didn't do the pitch. So what's the point? I could do the pitch or I could have the conversation. Well, I went and had the conversation. And I think there's a lot of, doing the mentor stuff for Catalyst, and it's like pitch. That's exhausting. That is exhausting. And the thing is, you start not liking your own thing. You're like, what I have to do? I have to go and, my God, I'm not a pitch machine, right? So I think there's a lot of kind of small little things that you learn along the way that you go, do you know what? See, when someone says just pitch, ask why. Why am I pitching? What is the point? Well, the point is to get the meeting. If there's nobody there you want to meet, save it for next time. Simple as that.
And I think the opportunity then from seeing that was seeing startups come up and their pitches were either one of two things. They're a really good sales pitch, but there was maybe no foundations underneath it. They needed a wee bit more structure, grand. Or they were particularly in depth, like Cloudsmith. I saw them pitch and I didn't quite get it. Then maybe needed a wee bit of sales. So the sales without the depth or depth without the sales. And I guess that's kind of where the program element came from. Raise that we were like, let's come in and try and fill those gaps. And let's support and accelerate some of those founders through the journey. And we've come out 4 or 5 years later with a portfolio of 20 startups that we've supported across so many different sectors. And that's the bit that gets me. I was really surprised about who walks through the door. And it's the industry expert. That'll be retail, music, cyber, insurance, walks through the door and says, I've seen this problem. I want to build technology to solve it. And that is the fascinating bit for me.
Yeah, for me, that's the buzz. I love that. I babble on about tiny rooms, but everything I've ever done that I loved started in the tiny room with the right people. 5 people that were just in a wee tiny room, me and Marty. For example, just doing probably chaotic things until something made sense. So yeah, I think I remember a conversation with a guy I won't name about Northern Ireland, its limitations and blah blah blah. And I said to him at the time, it was a long, long time ago, it was probably 25 years ago, said to him, everything that you've said is true, right? Absolutely. San Francisco is better. London is better. Taiwan will be better. Everywhere's going to be better, right? But where else will you get a level playing field? And I was like, I'm like, right. So you're just talking yourself out of doing something. You're blaming Northern Ireland for your own lack of faith, right? Take the plunge. And he did. And he went and he set up a great company, a really great company. Could he have done it elsewhere? Probably not. It had to be here, had to start here. And I've been passionate about keeping it here, starting it here, generating it here. You don't necessarily have to fund it here. You don't necessarily have to keep it here forever. But that I think we can be good at that early stage, initial spark, because we're smart people. We're very dedicated. We're really loyal. And that loyal bit, you don't get elsewhere. One of our competitors was Shopkeep, who came to Northern Ireland, and we had a hands-off agreement on staff, mostly because they had 120 million in their pocket and I had 120 quid. So the agreement was working for me more than them. But he told me a story of watching his staff square open an office 6 doors down in New York, and he watched his staff walk out of his Brooklyn office and walk in 6 doors down and sign a contract, go in. We don't do that here, and that is probably our greatest strength.
So some of the uncertainty then hit, obviously, the likes of COVID and online, and it's really fascinating. I was involved in the one particular startup who was in the marketing industry, and they were looking to boom or bust. And it wasn't necessarily COVID or the market that sunk that company. It was something else. Do you know what it was? A minority shareholder. Right? So these are the things to be thinking about, and it's not often talked about. Companies take time to build, and you build them through investors and shareholders and equity, and you build your team internally to operations, and you build an external team, and that external team is hard to find, and you kind of go with who you can find at the time, and that's okay. But what had happened was this company had gone on a bit of a journey and taken a bit of time, and they hadn't really maybe kept everybody up to date what was going on, had a bit of uncertainty, a bit of disagreement, and the company was like, right, we want to do this next big thing, we want to go big or go home, we've got investment, we want to do this, and we've got the investors lined up and we're ready to go, we need agreement. And the minority shareholder said no.
How much did they own, Very, very little. Very, very.
Enough, the mechanism they're trying to do had to have 100% agreement.
Oh, right, so they were the outlier. Wow.
And that collapsed the whole thing. So I think one of the biggest things that we talk about is, yes, it's great to have a lovely story, it's great to have the technology, it's great to have the commercial, but the foundational bit and the shareholding bit is so important, because you get the ownership from a founder's perspective. You start to jointly own this journey, and you have to bring everybody on that journey to be able to succeed. And it doesn't matter if you don't see them every day. If you see them once a year, just kind of keep in touch. At least they know where it's going, and if that decision has to be made, it's an easy thing to do. And back to the government piece, the government decisions take slightly longer. So if you need that decision made in January, you need to be talking to that government agency now, because to get that sign off for that investment to happen or that progress to happen takes a wee while.
Yeah, no, agreed. I think the thing that I've been trying to manufacture, for want of a better term, is a replication of how this works elsewhere. Because our first instinct a lot of the time is to look for a grant or some sort of leg up just because you've started a thing, you've had an idea. Everybody has an idea. Get over yourself. That's the thing, right? So just because you had an idea doesn't mean someone's going to help you, right? Or the government should step in. The government never steps in, right? You're sitting in a building where we spent 5 years talking to various culture ministers about how to fund this place, right? And not one of them gave a toss about what we were saying. But every one of them got their kids' photographs with Gary Lightbody. And that's really the agenda. It was about getting votes. We thought they would want to help young people get into music. We were like, oh, it's great. That doesn't matter that it's Edmund Pouch. Surely he cares about young people getting into music. Nah, he wanted the PR, right? So I do think there's kind of, an approach elsewhere that works. And we are very committed to doing things the Northern Irish way. And we should not be committed to doing things the Northern Irish way. Angel investment should be fast, risky, fair on both sides, right? Boom, here we go. Shouldn't be a 6-month, 12-month debate. Because by the time, for us, we started in 2009, really 2010 when the product was. If we had spent any longer sitting on our hands, Square would have been out long before us, right? And it turned out that Square just came up the inside and just obliterated everyone out anyway. But that was always going to happen, right? But we couldn't move fast enough. That was one of the problems, and that was because we were bogged down in, frankly, ridiculous stuff. What one of the US guys called majoring and minors with the government fund. So it's fast, Angel, risky, let's go. Do you know?
How long do I play?
Don't know. Forgot to put the timer on. Hang on. We have 5 minutes left. Sorry.
Well, I think let's touch a bit about the future. What's next? There's lots of, I'm going to say, over provision of programs. I'm happy to say
for sure.
We are going to be involved in a couple of programs up and coming in the new year. And I think it's great, but I think it's confusing for the founders. So as a founder, pick and choose the one that's going to be most beneficial to you, do that and move on. And there's so many programs out there. There is no excuses. You will find something for you. So there's a benefit of over provision, but there's no excuses. Just get on and do it. And what we're now seeing is loads of great startups getting loads of good advice and not enough funding. Funding's always been the problem. And I'm seeing more and more being de-risked. There was a time people bought off the back of an envelope. There was a time that I bought off a 6-page PowerPoint. That was a time. There was no real financials, unless you went looking for them. Now you need a data room full of stuff because the quality is just going up and up and up. So I think I've seen people move later stage, looking for traction, looking for quality. So you have to be the best you can be ready, move with speed, have your information, have your elevator pitch as a startup. But I think funding is the thing we need to be looking at. And it's the people that want to take this early stage risk. That we need more of those. We'd love people to get more involved. It doesn't have to be a significant contribution. A small amount can go a long way because your expertise is just as valuable, if not more than your money.
Yep. That domain expertise exists. When we can get options to support a BarCamp to this level and we can walk Stevie in here, I have to ask why every young entrepreneur wasn't following him in the door, right? Because I would have been, for sure. And that's the type of thing, that hustle to say, Stevie Morrow's going to be talking on Friday afternoon. I'm down there. And I might not have anything to say to him. I just want him to know who I am. I just want him to know that I'm building something. Hey, Stevie, I'm a builder. That'll do. That's your, and then next time you see him, you might see him in San Francisco the way I did after the first time I met Danny. So it's that hustle as well. And those the programs are, some of it's good, some of it's not good, in my opinion, right? But I think as well, the entrepreneur's journey, it doesn't change. If there's 1 billion programs, it doesn't change, right? The entrepreneur's journey is a hustle. It's always a hustle. And if you're sitting in a room for 6 months and you haven't hustled anyone, you've wasted 6 months. It's as simple as that. And it doesn't matter who's battering on up on a stage. There should be someone there to hustle. And if you're not hustling, somebody else will. Simple as that.
So if one ask for everybody here today, go away and talk to somebody about angel investing, go and read up on it. If you want to ask what it is. If you want to come along to events, we'll have events up and running between October and November. We're open to do some sort of raise event if anybody wants to come and pitch at it. I hate when I say that because I know what that means. It's going to be cool, fun and crazy. That's okay. Any questions?
Questions, folks?
Why do you think it's changed? Or I want photos. Sorry.
From like about 2 years ago, we went through Catalyst and got 10 grand funding, which was given back because the CEO at the time had personal problems with his family. But there seems to be, as you used to go back to your point about mentorship, people seem to be really into will mentor you whenever the reality is just give me the money, because you can mentor me all you want, but your mentorship's not going to pay. Because I think I asked you actually if you knew any full stack or front end developers, because that's what we're struggling with. So all the money was going there. But if that...
Yeah, I think you've seen an evolution of skills. So we have come from a place we didn't have a lot of skills and experience, particularly in the technology sector. Like, I've learned about it sort of the last 10 years. So if you think of that as a skill set, then people go, well, I've now learned about skills and technology. I can now mentor on that. So I think that's maybe the change is influencing the over provision of mentoring. But alongside that, we need to then push the funding beside it. And it just hasn't quite caught up. But also there's, as I said earlier, there's more and more startups, which is cool because that's innovation in class. And look at this problem, I really want to solve that. But then there's a overemphasis on how many startups are out there. There's a pyramid. They have to funnel up to try and get the money, and the quality is just going up and up and up, which is where the mentoring feeds to try and get that quality. So I guess that's the machine. It's a good thing and a bad thing.
I'd say to you, if your equity investor doesn't own equity in anything, ask them why. And if the person telling you how to build your product has never built anything, ask them why. And if they don't have an answer, walk. Any other questions?
Thank you. I just want to say, just before I ask your question, a massive thank you to both of you for everything you guys have done for the industry, because you've both been around and you're both prepared to share your experiences. I've certainly found you both to be open, and what you're saying about Stevie, if everyone in the room isn't following these guys around asking questions, why? Because there's two amazing minds up here. But my question is about the hustle. And I think whenever I was coming up and learning my craft, that's all you could fucking do was hustle, because there was nothing. There was nothing else. There was no infrastructure and there was no other way to learn. But do you think that culture has changed now that there is so much available and it's almost like, I've got an idea, so give me money, like you said?
Well, if you want to be in programs for the next 5 years, you can. Do you know? And you'll probably get by, but you won't build anything. Do you know? And you won't meet people like me sitting in a program, and you won't meet people like Jennie or people like you. We're not going to sit there in a program for 6 months, right? You can't pay me to do anything like that. No way. Because it's no fun. You know? It's like, I'll do it for free, for sure. But no way you pay me to do it. Ain't happening, because that takes all the fun out of it. You know? So I think it hasn't changed. I do think that it's a mentality that says, I'm not going to sit in my hands and wait. I'm going to go and find that person. I'm going to go and get that director. I'm going to go and build that board. I'm going to jump on a fucking flight to San Francisco. No idea where I'm going to find the Chieftain Bar. It's a mentality that says just go and try, you know. And I do think that we do talk down the ambition still, and we need to stop talking down the ambition and stop promoting the fact that you can just sit there for a while and watch it work out. It never happens. That's nobody's story. That's the story of every also ran on the planet, you know.
Yeah, definitely. I love the hustle and actually have an ask. There's so many times you go into a conversation, lovely chit chat, no ask, I can't help, I don't know what you want. It could be anything. It could be a connection, could be having a challenge, just whatever, a spreadsheet. Could be anything. If I don't know, I'll find somebody. But I think that's the benefit of Northern Ireland. If you don't know, you'll find somebody who does know. So have the ask. It doesn't necessarily have to be money straight up. And that's a great way of building relationships. So we've had a really cool network of advisors that are experienced, been there and done it. You get to talk to them about your finance spreadsheet. 6 months later, you need to raise investment. Who's going to be more interested? The guy who's already, or girl who's already engaged and knows your business, to build relationships early based on your challenges and opportunities rather than on the money is the way forward. And the hustle, it's a hustle.
Because the money follows execution, right? Every time. Good. Any other questions? Last question, I think, actually. I think we might be danger of running over.
No.
Which I'm not allowed to do as the organizer.
Yeah. Well, no, thank you very much, everybody.
All good.
For coming.
Thank you so much.